What's up, guys? It's Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be talking about how wide receivers can get faster out of their breaks. So we're going to be talking about the 3 specific things that you guys want to do to make sure that you get speed and acceleration when you get out of the top of a route, and some of the mistakes that a lot of wide receivers make at the top of these breaks when you got to drop your hips and snap down and when you got to make that speed cut. So I hope this video gives you guys some value, but fellas, if you guys want over an hour and a half's worth of video on specific route running techniques and press release techniques that you guys can do to improve your game, check out that very first link in the description for our route running Bible. So what you'll get access to is a 10-day step-by-step schedule on how to improve your route running in 10 days. It's 10 days, 2 weeks long of specific drills that you guys need to do with sets and reps to improve your overall route running. And we include specific routes that you want to run to improve your overall game. And then we include a 49-minute long video on 20 different press releases, when to use those releases, and then drills to work on each one with sets and reps. So I hope you guys could check that out. Very first link in the description. Let's get started. So first route here. Okay, it's Sterling Shepard running this dig route off of a speed cut, okay? So you see how much speed he is able to get off of this thing, right? So let's talk about it. So when you guys are able to run a dig route, like any kind of 90-degree cut, right? So you got to run a 90-degree out route, so that's like just a 10-yard out, maybe a 5-yard out, and then in this case, maybe it's like an 8-yard, 10-yard, 12-yard dig, whatever it is, or maybe it's an under route, and you're doing this off of a speed cut. You got to make sure that you know how to drive off of that cut. There are 2 things that give you speed out of the break: how sudden you could be with either that stick or how sudden you could be with that hip drop and violent, and then how much you can turn that energy or that explosion that you created from that break into acceleration, right? So when Shepard's going up into this thing, you see how when he breaks, everything's committed. His shoulders and his hips are committed to the vertical portion of this route. That's what makes your cuts sudden, fellas. If you guys don't feel like you have the most sudden cuts in the world and you feel like that your cuts are slow, they're not explosive, try committing your shoulders and your hips vertical a little bit longer. Because like, think about it like this. If you're running a comeback route, like I'll draw it right here. Let's say the quarterback's over here. You got to run a comeback to this side. If you guys are running and you start to round your shoulders and then you drop down, you're not going to have any explosion because you're giving away where you're running, and that DB knows where we're going. But if you guys run this comeback route and you stay committed till this point and you drop your hips, and the hip drop is what's trying to make you change direction, you're going to have a lot more explosion on this thing, and you're going to be able to create energy at the top of the break. That's what we want to be able to do in this case when you're making this speed cut, right? So we're coming off here, shoulders and hips are fully committed. Bam, we just pop this thing off right in stride. Now, the part about this cut that a lot of people don't talk about is that it's got to be underneath your frame, right? So a lot of people reach with this cut. A lot of people think that them reaching way out is selling the break. That's not the case. Your upper half is what sells the break. The cut is just to give you some balance and to give you some explosion. So this cut has to be underneath your frame. Shoulders and hips have to be committed. The cut is what changes direction. Now, how can I turn this cut? That is what creates explosion, but a lot of people can create explosion. It's like a 40-yard dash. A lot of people can have a great start, but not a lot of people can have that speed that takes them through the next 30 yards of this thing to get a good time. They'll have a good start, but then they just stop. They stop driving their arms. They don't have good form, whatever it may be, but that's how you have to treat a break. We're trying to create energy to shoot us out. So off of a speed cut, I got to make sure that I'm driving off this inside arch of my foot. I'm not saying cut on the inside arch because that's how you're going to hurt your knee. I'm saying you want to cut, you want to be on the balls of your feet, but when you're trying to get out of this break, you want to make sure that you're pushing off of that inside arch. You're pushing off of here to create that explosion, almost like a pitcher when he's pitching off of a mound. He's pushing off that inside part of his foot so you could really drive, and now the only concern that you have is you just got to open up that gate. You got to open up that left here, that inside hip, to get your hips turned on this route. Now, a lot of people can do that, but they'll still drift off the route. They won't have speed. They won't have explosion. So what you got to make sure that you combine it with is you want to take the arm that's trying to get you out. Like, let's say you're on the right side and you're trying to run a dig to the left. You want to take your left arm and pretend like you got somebody right behind you and you're trying to elbow them. You got to rip your arms. You got to keep that 90-degree angle like we've all talked about with speed before to be able to get your hips around. You see how right here, that's what I'm talking about. You want to elbow somebody with that arm to get your hips and shoulders turned so you could use that energy that you created off of that step, that push off that inside arch to open up your hips, and you could make that tighter change of direction. You're running a tighter break where you're staying straight down the line, and you could get some more separation from this DB. The whole point of having speed out of a break, fellas, is to widen the distance from that DB. If you don't widen the distance from the DB, you're not going to get any separation. Anybody can get separation at the top of the route. Can you keep that separation? And that speed out of the break, you running out of the break and you creating energy and turning that energy into acceleration is what ultimately keeps you open. Let's watch this thing again, full speed. It's not about getting open, it's about staying open. So great job by Shepard coming up here, committing to the break, being sudden, then using those arms to rip him out of this thing. Now, we're going to be taking a look at this route here. And now, this is an NFL receiver. I believe this is AJ Green. And again, like this, we're just going to look at two different examples here, right? This is obviously one of the best receivers to play. I don't know, top whatever, but just he's an NFL receiver. He's one of the best in the world. And just even these guys sometimes can make little adjustments on their breaks to help them get some more explosion out of there, right? Now, he's a pretty tall guy. So for you tall guys out there, this is something that maybe you can work on. So you watch him come up into this break. Now, to the untrained eye, you'll be like, oh, he took too many steps at the top of the break. That's not too many steps. Right? This is one of the mistakes that you guys can make to create that energy out of the break. It's not too many steps. Everybody should get so caught up in the steps at the top of the route. That's not the case. The steps do not dictate how fast you get in and out of the route. I could take 5 steps a whole hell of a lot faster than a lot of people can take 3 because they slowed down before they took 3 and they don't have any speed going into the break. So you damn well know they're not going to get any speed coming out of the break, right? So when he comes into this route here, you see how many steps does he take? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And he's out of it in 5 steps. Right? 5 steps is not bad. That's not too many steps right there. The only issue was that there was not really a drop of his hips. It was kind of like he's running in stride, then he just kind of slows down, right? It's almost like he's having a gradual slow down when he gets to the top of this thing. Then he's going to run out. It's like he's starting the stem, stopping at the top, then starting again. Now, the problem with that is just there's no energy creation, and that energy turns into acceleration, right? And you see how he's kind of sitting back in this, his chest is straight up. Now, I'm going to show you an example of Jerry Jeudy here in a second, of kind of the opposite end of the spectrum of this and how you guys can use that to create some explosion out of this route. So just make sure, fellas, that it's not a slowdown. Anytime you guys got to drop your hips, it's not a beat the drum. It's not a slow down with my feet to where I completely come to a stop and then I run out of it. There's got to be a level change. I got to be running up here and I got to have a level change where my hips drop. It's not just a heavier step with my feet. I got to have that level change to create some energy so I could shoot out of this route. Let's watch the thing again, full speed one more time. Just make sure, fellas, that when I'm trying to create energy out of the break, I'm not slowing myself down. The hip drop is what slows you down. So obviously we look at 2 different routes here. We look at Jerry Jeudy. Now, again, everybody's going to say, oh, Judy's just a different receiver, right? There are plenty of other receivers that do the exact same thing. Stephon Diggs is a perfect example. Jerry Jeudy is a great example. Devontae Adams when he gets into breaks. Julio Jones, different examples of guys who all do the exact same thing with their hips, right? Jeudy might be a little bit more limber, might be a little bit more flexible, can make certain cuts that other guys might not be able to make or have him look a certain way. But for him to get in and out of this break, this shows what the difference would be. So he's running a curl route, right? It's just the opposite of a comeback. It's the same kind of routes, the same kind of break. But now I want you to see when he gets into this break, there's no slowdown, right? Right here, there's no slowdown of his feet. It's just a drop. His hip drop and how much he's shooting his weight down and changing levels is what gets him into this break. Now, that hip drop, that weight drop, that level change, whatever you want to think of it, that's that explosive position that we want to get into. And that explosive position will create energy out of the break so you could get more speed and be faster out of the breaks, because that's ultimately what this video is about. The video is about not getting separation. It's about keeping separation. We could talk about getting space all day long. I could show you a million different moves. I could show you a million different releases that you could use to get you space, but I'd be doing you a disservice if I didn't talk about how you need to keep that space. The breaks all stay the same. You guys might not be a team that runs a lot of curls, but you may be a team that runs a lot of post outs. The break stays the same, right? You guys might not be a curl team, but you might be like a 15-yard comeback team. The break stays the same. It all stays the same. The routes just change. So when we get this low like this, fellas, my chin goes to my knee, I'm in a situation where I could drive out. And that explosion, you see how he takes 3 steps on this break? And again, I'm not saying you have to take 3 steps, but that 3rd step, that's the one that he's going to push out. If you stay in that low explosive position where you snap, you pivot that step, you hook that step, and let's say rather than your 3rd step, it's your 5th step, that last step of it's got to push you out. It's got to create that explosion so you could drive, and you see how his arms get back to running, picking up those knees, picking up those feet to get out of this break and come back to that ball. That's how we create more speed. That's how we get faster out of my breaks. I got to run into the break. I don't slow myself down. I want to start, create energy, and keep the same speed that I had in and keep that same speed out. So that's the number one key right there when you're trying to drop your hips to keep that speed and get faster out of your breaks. So watch the thing again, full speed. It's not about steps, fellas. It's about how much energy can you create and can you turn that energy into acceleration to widen the distance with the DB while you are still selling vertical. Okay. All right, guys. I really want to thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you guys have any questions at all, don't hesitate to leave those in the comments below. Always appreciate the feedback. Always appreciate the things you guys have to say. It helps me come up with new ideas for videos. So I really appreciate that. And again, fellas, our route running Bible, over an hour and a half's worth of specific content for wide receivers, all the drills you need to do to improve your route running in 10 days. It's a 2-week long wide receiver training schedule. And then, fellas, we give you a 49-minute long video, 20 different press releases, when to use each release against what defensive look. And then we give you drills to work on each one with sets and reps. Hope you guys could check that out. Very first link in the description. I'll see you guys next time.